Hello and welcome to this Wednesday edition of Newsmax Now. I'm Carl Higby filling in for John Bachman tonight. November 2020 is still more than a year away, but this is the race for president and it is heating up day by day. Democrats are crisscrossing the country, making their case for why they should be the president or the one to replace Trump in the White House. That is why I want to welcome in former Pennsylvania congressman and highest ranking military officer ever elected to Congress. He was a 3-star Navy admiral and now a Democratic presidential candidate, Joe Sestak. Admiral, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Carl, it's great to be on you, and it's Joe, please, and thank you for double the service you did.
Likewise. Well, I extend my my appreciation to the service despite what party you're in. First question in, just a few sentences, sir. Why are you running for president in this crowded field?
Well, my daughter's brain cancer came back last year, and I wasn't going to get in. But as she survived glioblastoma, I decided there was one overarching reason to get in. Someone needs to unite this country again, much like we had under Ronald Reagan and John F. Kennedy, where we disagreed well. And that's why I'm proud to have represented a nearly 2-to-1 Republican district and got reelected by 20 points and spent a dime. If we don't do that, how are we going to face those dangers abroad, a rise in authoritarian China, and also bringing what is unique on the Democratic side, global experience, the depth and breadth of it. So those are the two primary reasons I am running.
Okay, so you talked a little bit about uniting and stuff like that. Now that is a big talking point that allegedly Trump has divided this country, and I don't agree with that from the stance that it is used against him. When you say uniting, what is your primary way that you intend to unite this country?
Yeah, if you noticed, I didn't say Mr. Trump had divided it.
Fair enough.
I mean, this has been Mr. Trump, I tell people, is not the problem. He's a symptom of a problem. When you have people that had senators and congressmen alike, senators of both parties, that voted for that war in Iraq, that did not understand that you better know how it's going to end before you vote to start a war. And yet, over 2 decades later, with unaccountable consequences, not one has ever said, I'm accountable for that. Think about Wall Street, where one place you want to ensure greed stays outside of a wall and accountability in. And when that came down, I had to keep my constituents' office open to 9 o'clock every night, 7 days a week. And not one ever said, I'm accountable for that, as 450 took a lobbying job. So in a sense, that lack of trust in leadership that is above accountability is giving us a sense of trust. I demonstrated in that Republican district that even when we disagreed on some of my policies, I listened to them. We found common ground, and when we differed, we disagreed well. Or when I stood up to my party, when the president on down, the vice president on down said, well, I'm going to embrace Republican turned Democrat Arlen Specter, who had tried to humiliate Anita Hill. I said, you're wrong. And I didn't try to keep my run at the same time for my congressional seat, Carl, as you know. So that kind of accountability that you're for people, just like you were in the military, you were for the troops above anything else, above party, above self, above any specialism, demonstrating it is why I'm running. Okay,
fair enough. And that is a huge issue that the American people have, is the lack of accountability in government. So, there's a wide field of candidates, though, on your side, especially with Kristen Gillibrand just dropping out, Eric Swalwell, John Hickenlooper, the list goes on and on of people who are getting out. So how do you think that you are uniquely suited to start rising those polls? I mean, we saw that the debates centered around basically 3 or 4 people, and there's only about 7% of people undecided. So what puts you at the front of that race?
Well, as you know, in the military, we say amateurs do tactics, experts do logistics. So we laid out a plan because I didn't get into about under 3 months ago. And we want to secure the beachhead in Iowa because you have to find 1,800 people to head the caucus precincts. 1,800. So I went everywhere. I just came from a Rotary Club. I just do not go to Democratic events. I go to chambers of commerce and Rotary Clubs and identifying people who will head those caucuses. And now I'm leaving a team here and headed to New Hampshire because I was there for a short period, Carl, and 90% of them have not made up their mind, according to union leader, Politico, and others. Only one endorsement. And the reception to my message there was extraordinary. Do I believe in policy? You bet I do. But do I also believe that dangers abroad, whether it's a rising China or climate change, can harm us here? You need someone in the world. We do. But that united message, and that's really why I'm running, was really well done there. And so in terms of people accepting it. So look, we've just begun, and we're in phase 2 now. And yep, soon you'll see that, I'll soon be invited, and I'm very grateful to you that I'll soon see maybe perhaps MSNBC, CNN, and Fox inviting us on to get this message out as we rise in the polls.
Well, you know, it's funny. A lot of your political rivals on the Democratic ticket, they're using basically shock and awe. You saw Beto O'Rourke saying, "Hey, I'm going to take your AR-15s." Do you think that that your campaign is being overshadowed by people essentially just running as far as they can to the left? And how are you going to bring that back to the center? Because I'd love to see the Democratic Party back there.
Well, you know, there's two good points you have made. One is, someone once asked me, I think it was Vox or Quartz, you know, those wonderful, whether you do interviews, and they said, this is a campaign of outrage. Why aren't you running on outrage? I said, because if I run on outrage, how am I ever going to govern to bring this country together? And so second
That's
point
actually the best point
made,
I think any Democratic candidate has ever made right there.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, how you are when you run, and then you expect to have trust and people to feel be accountable to Americans. I want to be accountable to all Americans. But second, this is important, Carl, the point you made. Look, how do we look at things in the military? Well, you know, when people on that stage said, or that question was asked, who's here for Medicare for all? And every hand went out and somebody backed away from it the next day. I would have shouted out when I was asked, but what I would have done is, that's the wrong question. How are you going to get there? Because in the military, you learn. Piss poor planning gives piss poor execution.
That's true. That's true.
And so when I step back and I say, how are we going to accomplish something, I lay it out. So I look at something like, people say college loans, let's forgive them all. I said, wait a moment, there's a program that we should be using that you don't have to. We should make it universal and mandatory, that you don't have to pay back more than 10% of your income, which is in law today. But this is what I want to focus on. The 65% of Americans who don't have a college degree, it's the enlisted men and women of the military, those that really make this economy go. We spend less than any developed nation on labor force training, 0.001% of GDP. So when you lose your job in the military because the F-15 goes out, you know we send people that lost their jobs to the Air Force Community College to learn how to do the F-22.
Correct.
The Air Force, I mean, what happens to the coal miner when he loses his job? Yeah. And so we have to have a training and retraining for a lifetime. I call it training for a lifetime. Wrote about it in my book in 2015, and you know what? I've sold 6 copies. But this is what we really need, Carl, is focus on the engine. Yeah. Those were the Trump supporters and the Clinton supporters. Who's focused on them, particularly my party that's supposed to be the party of the people?
You know, I like where you're going, because I don't have a college degree myself. I dropped out after 9/11 and joined the military. But I want to move on to a huge thing that is your talking point here above anyone else, which is Iran. I mean, you were actually over there. You commanded, I believe it was the 5th Fleet. And so you understand the dynamic. You wrote a piece on Newsmax that was on Newsmax Platinum, and you said that it will be unlike anything we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I happen to agree with you. So what is your plan, and what would you do if you were the president right now and Iran did what they just did?
Well, that's a tough question you've asked, because if
and you got to do it in a minute.
I would have. Okay, here's what I'd do. I'd rejoin the Iranian Accord in a heartbeat. Why? Because we had, by economic sanctions that hurt, we had removed that nuclear weapons making capability. And we had inspectors there every day making sure it didn't come back. Then we broke our word. I'd redo that right now, because you know as well as I do that if we have to take down that nuclear weapons making capability, it would take us weeks or months, and we have to get out of the Persian Gulf because our carriers can't survive there. Look, military stop problems. They don't fix them. Even World War II, our military stopped Germany, but we fixed fascism by the Marshall Aid Plan. And we fixed Iran, at least in that one point, and then we should have fixed it in other areas, but we don't want our military to now go in and try to fix something that had already been fixed. We don't
want to be in the business of nation building. Joe Sestak, thank you very much. You can find him online at joesestak.com. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Admiral.
Carl, thanks for having me on board, sir.
Do appreciate it.